America is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that
we're on. Good morning. Well, Eugene was that nice guy.
He has my mic off. Thank God. Hot mic. I hear you. Thank you for protecting me. I appreciate it.
We're on. Good thing you weren't listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO a second ago. But you are listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. I'm your host, Larry Ells, and my co-host, my brother from another, Dr. Bradley, is in the house here giving folks a checkup from the neck up. We want to thank our sponsor, The Money Store. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Coral Holbrook a call at area code 508-345-4726. Again, that's The Money Store, the proud sponsor of At the Round Table with MAMLEO. You know, Dr. Bradley, I know you've been on the receiving end of this as well. You were part of the command staff, and usually with us, if we hiccup the wrong way, the exit sign is blinking glaringly, right?
Absolutely.
For you to be gone, and so
no second chances, bro.
No second chances. You don't really get a first chance, so there's no second chance to be had, and so. Eddie Crispin, I tell people, I keep saying I'm going to put it on a t-shirt. If you're here long enough, you'll get a turn. Some of us have gotten multiple turns. Very rare, because usually at the first, and it's like not baseball. You don't get 3 strikes, you don't even get 2. You get one. So the recent controversy in BPD is they have demoted former Deputy Superintendent Eddie Crispin from his position in leadership at the Boston Police Department, which, to be perfectly clear, the commissioner has every right. You serve on a command staff at the commissioner's request, right? At his and he can remove you for no other reason. But when you do that and you're asked, and then you start fabricating reasons that don't make sense and that actually can be proven to be false, this is when you have a problem. They always say the cover up is worse than the crime. He could have just said, no, it's not going in my way, and appeared that. But then to exaggerate and say, well, their first reasoning was that Eddie Crispin was been tasked with replacing me on the police oversight stand in the post and training as the commissioner on the post. And we got everything, and then Commissioner Cox said that it was a conflict of interest, and AG's office, Andrea Campbell, as well as the Post Commission, went through all that and said there is no conflict. Matter of fact, there is a chief of police spot reserved, and there's the chief of Framingham, who is one of the commissioners on there. He oversees a whole department. Eddie is just one of many who are part of the command staff, so he is not a final arbiter on anything. And you would think, as you said, we talked about off air, that you would welcome having someone in your leadership team that someone thinks highly enough that, like, it's at some point, as Commissioner Gross did in elevating Eddie to that position.
So let me just, for the sake of the listening audience, could you give us a quick overview of what the Post is and what it does?
Sure, great question. So the Post was, during the reforms after George Floyd, Massachusetts is one of the few states that ever had any certification for law enforcement. Once you were appointed, unless you did something erroneous and then your department was to oversee your internal affairs, and most police departments of smaller caliber don't have an internal affairs, right? So the Post was tasked with established by the governor and by the legislators. And this is the first time that law enforcement have to be certified to serve in their positions, right? It's almost like having a driver's license, right? And there's training that is now statewide that has never been, it was a hodgepodge. The only thing that you were required as far as training was the MPTC, the Mass Police Training Council, when you're in the academy. That's the only training that was pretty much consistent across the state where you had to meet those guidelines. Is now
consistent.
Your in-service training you have from your department, but there is a component, and even go down to at the range, that must be completed from MPTC, as well as online 30 plus hours of online training that is standard across the board. So everyone is receiving at least minimum the same training, 30 hours, firearms training, and other things that are across the board. And this must be completed every year. And every 3 years you're up for recertification.
So if you fail those training, you can be
if you don't complete the training, that's right. Where, in the past, let's be real, I've been to the new range that the Boston Police Department built several years ago, but ironically, it had been up and running for about 4 years, and I remember going there to shoot prior to the post. I'm sorry, when post was certified, because that's what took place, and I had an officer come in, he's like, wow, this is nice. How long has this been here? So what that told me was clearly he hadn't been there in 4 years, right? And our rules say we're supposed to qualify every 2 years.
Yeah.
So if people knew the right people, that didn't happen. So now you can't avoid it because there's accountability from the top down, which is another.
Now I see it. So you're mitigating authority. You're mitigating, authority.
And people ability to circumvent it, right? Because everyone now has to go through the same training. Exactly. And so that has really been threatening to people because now, before, departments could rebuff, if you call a request or, a lawyer or someone, a politician, asking for information about an investigation, couldn't get it. The even Boston has an OPAT, which is not to be disparaging, but it's a way watered down version of it. The Post has subpoena powers by law, not just by request, by law. Within 48 hours of any complaint being lodged against a police officer with their department, must submit those to the Post. Even if they think the Post already has them, the Post can audit them. So there is oversight in a manner that has not been in this Commonwealth up until recent.
Okay, so now I understand. Okay, now, so he feels that having someone on the command staff level serve on the Post is a conflict?
Right, in which this individual, when he was first appointed, Eddie Crispin, was appointed deputy superintendent in charge, the assistant chief of internal affairs.
Right.
Which has access to records immediately that the Post doesn't. If as a commissioner on the Post, I couldn't just willy-nilly. I could request and I could subpoena something if I wanted to take a look at it. But it wouldn't be just because I don't like Willie Bradley, let me see what's in his file. It would really have to have some relevance as to what I'm looking for.
So what is the rest of the story, though? I mean, what is it?
That's what we're trying to find out. What's the real?
What's the real story here?
It's changed several times, and it was because initially there was a conflict of interest having Eddie in this position. And like I said, the Attorney General's office, Andrea Campbell, debunked that, as well as the Post Commission debunked that, put out a very powerful statement that there was no conflict. Matter of fact, the head of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, Larry Calderon, serves still currently on the Post Commission. And no one is saying that's a conflict because he represents members who a lot of times come to him when these complaints are brought against them. And I'm not saying he shouldn't serve, but I'm saying that you would think, okay, someone who has prior knowledge of a lot of this, and which even Eddie up in internal affairs, he wouldn't have prior knowledge of this because a lot of times the investigations would be done by a supervisor before they get to that. So, now it's saying it's a perceived conflict of interest, and it's not like. But I want folks to listen to this interview that I did as well with Adrian Walker with NPR's Radio Boston, and then we're gonna. I know we got some calls. Callers, just please stand by.
Radio Boston. I'm Tiziana Deering. So this morning, we are looking at a move by the Boston Police Commissioner that is making waves. And it's making waves because of what it might do to the state's efforts to hold police accountable. Commissioner Michael Cox removed a man named Eddie Crispin from his command staff. Now, Crispin was deputy superintendent. Now his title is sergeant detective and assistant bureau chief. That's a demotion. And he makes $40,000 a year less than before now. Crispin says it's because he agreed to serve on the state's major police oversight body, and Commissioner Cox didn't like it. The department has released conflicting statements early on, but now says it was that, plus other things, has not explained what those other things are. Now, as high-profile figures like Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell condemn the move, and Boston Mayor Michelle Wu supports Cox, the question is, could the move have a chilling effect on who works on and who participates in the state's police reform efforts? In a little bit, we're going to talk to retired Boston Police Detective Larry Ellison. Crispin took Ellison's place on this statewide commission. But first, Adrian Walker, who is associate editor and columnist at the Boston Globe, has been writing on this, joins us now. Welcome back, Adrian.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And listen, just before we start, I'll note Radio Boston reached out to the Boston Police Department for a statement, did not receive a response in time for the show. But we are discussing dates with the department for Commissioner Cox to join us on air in the coming weeks. So, Adrian, we're going to do a couple pieces here. But I think we have to start by setting some more of this up for people. So let's start with the commission. It's the Police Officer Standards and Training Commissioner post. What is it and what does it do?
So what it does, it came out of the criminal justice reform efforts of a couple of years ago. And what it's supposed to do is create more uniform standards for police across the state and also strengthen efforts to hold police accountable for bad behavior.
And in that accountability piece, as I understand it, a key thing, Adrian Walker, is it can actually decertify or decommission police officers, which is a thing that didn't exist before this reform law came into being.
That's correct, and that's the most important thing probably the Post Commission does.
And so there are... Go.
No, the reason Eddie Crispin was asked to serve here, and one of the reasons he was so important, is because he had been a key driving force in reform efforts within the BPD, including serving a few years ago on a commission headed by Wayne Budd that suggested a bunch of reforms.
And that was a commission. So there was a state level effort, but also Boston Mayor Marty Walsh had a panel that was looking at reforms at the city level, and Crispin was involved in that, yes?
Yes, exactly.
All right, so now at the state level, you've got this post commission, and there's a preset number of people in sort of slots, correct?
That's right, yes.
All right, and one traditionally comes from a thing that's called MAMLEO, which is the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers, and that's actually how Eddie Crispin finds himself on this commission.
That's right. He is the MAMLEO appointee to this commission.
And tell us how that works, because this is where the Attorney General comes into the mix.
Right. So MAMLEO basically nominates someone to serve in their seat, and then that person has to be approved by the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell.
And so, Adrian Walker, as things unfolded, and this was largely, we found out because of reporting in the Boston Globe where you work, spell out now for us sort of the back and forth. As things unfold, what does it look like happened?
So as things unfold, Crispin says he went to Greg Long, who was then the number 2 in the Boston Police Department. He retired about a week ago. And he told Greg Long that he had been asked by MAMLEO to serve in this position. Long shook his hand and said congratulations. As far as Crispin was concerned, that was the end of it. When it got to Campbell, of course, is a former Boston City Councilor. She's known Crispin for years. She immediately signs off, great idea. And then Crispin goes to Michael Cox, who says, I don't think you can be on the command staff of the BPD and serve on the Post Commission.
Why?
You've got to do one or the other.
And Crispin says, I'm going to stay on the Post Commission?
And Crispin says, I'm going to stay on the Post Commission. Crispin says he was, stunned to be presented with this choice in the first place. Cox, of course, has said that this is a conflict of interest. Crispin insists that he doesn't understand what the conflict is.
All right, I'm going to play a little bit of sound here from Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell on GBH Radio yesterday, Boston Public Radio, talking about this.
We stress that he should be allowed to do both, that it's not a violation of the statute and it's not a violation of the conflict of interest law, because we took that into consideration. If anything, it actually encourages the post statute and everything, and policy and practice encourage folks to be active law enforcement and also to serve in some meaningful role, to serve on posts, because there's a perspective they bring. And I was confident, as was my team, that he would not have violated any secrets, of course, of Commissioner Cox or anyone else in serving in that role, or he serves in MAMLEO and other entities.
So, Adrian Walker, it's clear why this could matter in the Boston Police Department, but why does this matter beyond the Boston Police Department?
It matters beyond the Boston Police Department because Eddie Crispin is exactly the kind of person you want for the reasons the Attorney General just laid out. He's a person who is actively involved in law enforcement at a high level. He has a ton of experience. He has great judgment. He's just the kind of person who should be on this panel.
All right, so Adrian Walker, you've done some more analysis on this, and I want to talk to you. I want to get more of your take, and then I want to put it in the context of some larger questions about police in Massachusetts right now. We will do that, but first I want you to stand by for a couple of minutes. I'm going to bring in another voice here. Larry Ellison is on the line. Larry Ellison is a retired Boston police detective, past president of MAMLEO, the Minority Law Enforcement Officers Group in Massachusetts, and a founding member of the Post Commission. Crispin replaced him. Larry Ellison, thanks for joining us here on Radio Boston.
Thank you. Good morning.
So were you surprised by the move by Commissioner Cox, Larry Ellison?
I was surprised by the move, but I wasn't in some regards, knowing Commissioner Cox. He and I grew up together. So, these are, and some of the comments he's made since then that are really troubling as well. One of them being that, Eddie could only serve one master. I mean, that's something that, really infuriates me and really triggers for black folks, and should trigger anyone, regardless of the race of the person making a comment like that he could only serve one master at a time. This is not a situation of having a master, and those words itself really, in my opinion, are a disqualifier of his leadership, not Eddie's.
So for you, Larry Ellison, the word master is a loaded word in particular?
Absolutely, and that's along with so many other comments. I think if people really follow recent conversations with Commissioner Cox and his city council hearing recently on MAMLEO's pushback to delay another exam that Commissioner Cox is adamantly that he wants to have sooner rather than later, which makes no sense when there are a number of officers of color and women and veterans who could be promoted. That money was cut from the city council budget for that. And Cox's statement there was basically, he said the reason why, I'm paraphrasing, that black officers don't do well is they don't apply themselves. So these are just piling on. And then also the people he's surrounded himself with making decisions, and one of them being his chief of staff, who was the former chief legal counsel under Commissioner Ed Davis, who was part of the selection process that brought Michael Cox to us. She was someone who consistently, in my opinion, targeted black officers, and now she is really the other half of his brain who is making these decisions, and someone who we have no confidence in whatsoever that has any history of treating black officers fairly. So I think, Eddie did the right thing. He should not have been put in a position where he had to choose one or the other. As the Attorney General eloquently said, you can serve both on the post and on the police department's command staff. I think it showed more proof that he is the right person for that job, and I think he made the right decision based on what is best for the department and oversight. And as the agent, I served on the post, and it is also oversight in law enforcement in the departments, something that has not been in place. And I can tell you it has been very effective in that regard, my time there. And I think Eddie is a great addition to that post position.
So Larry Ellison, a couple of things. For listeners who may not realize, Michael Cox himself is a man of color, served in the Boston Police Department for a long time before leaving the state and then coming back a couple of years ago as commissioner. During his time on the Boston Police Department, actually ran afoul of white officers for filing a civil rights suit after having been mistaken for a perpetrator and beaten by white detectives in the 90s. But you're saying, and I'm going to paraphrase, but I really want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, Larry Ellison. You believe he's demonstrating what is essentially a racist culture in the Boston Police Department? His command staff is a diverse command staff.
Doesn't matter.
Well, see, that's the throwaway that they all say they have the most diverse command staff. Honestly, if you unpack that, the police department was more diverse under acting Commissioner Greg Long than it is under Commissioner Cox. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Cox started dismantling the number of people of color in the command staff under his leadership. Like I said, it was more people of color in leadership roles in the command staff under acting Commissioner Long than under Commissioner Cox. So that's a throwaway line for most commissioners. And, if you add and subtract, you take one away, you add one, it looks like it. But it does nothing to move the other folks under there, which we're trying to do in promotions for supervisory positions. That's where because these people serve as well. The other ones are civil service promotions. And to me, those are more important. I'm not saying the other ones aren't important, but those are more important because those cannot be taken. And this is the perfect example of that, is that because Eddie Crispin did not bow to his wishes, he was brought back to the civil service rank of sergeant, which that can't be taken away from him. These others can. So there's more independence he has now than probably he had as a leader in the police department, as we can see.
So we're speaking with Larry Ellison, who is past president of the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers. He's been on the Post Commission. He's a retired Boston police detective. 2 remaining questions for you, Larry Ellison. First, is Commissioner Cox aware of your feelings? Have you ever had a communication with him about how you feel about his leadership?
We have over the years. Like I said, Commissioner Cox and I grew up on the same street. So we have had conversations. Matter of fact, he tells people publicly how I encouraged him to take the promotional exam to sergeant, which actually helped him to move up the food chain, to be in a leadership role, and to become the police commissioner here in the city of Boston. But I think he's out of touch with issues that are germane and unique to Black officers. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I went through forced busing. He went to private school because his family had the means to do so. So our perspectives in life are totally different, and they're relevant. Even though they're different, they are relevant.
And to clarify, you referred to some things he said as disqualifying. Do you think he cannot be effective as commissioner of the Boston Police Department?
Well, look, we would be hypocrites if a white police commissioner had made some of the statements that Commissioner Cox had. There would be an uproar. There would be marches on police headquarters, and rightfully so. So he doesn't get a pass because he's in a black suit. He doesn't get a pass. It's reprehensible, and he should be called out. And Mayor Wu should be held accountable that she has someone leading the police department that is making these really charged statements about the lack of intelligence of Black officers as far as them being able to move themselves up in promotionals, as well as that they can only serve one master. We are not slaves.
Larry Ellison is a retired Boston police detective.
So there you have it, folks. It's a recent interview. I play that because I think people need to have a perspective of why we are and how we got to this point. I'm looking at Dr. Bradley's face and reading that. But also just want to remind folks on Wednesday at 12th Baptist Church on Warren Street, there's going to be a community forum to discuss what's happening. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. What's happening, not just with Deputy Superintendent Crispin, but what is happening. And like I said, folks, if this is what happens when we don't pay attention, these type of statements that you can only serve one master. I don't care whose mouth it comes out of. It's not acceptable, and I can't just sit back and take it. So, I know callers have been patiently waiting. Want to hear from them. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning, Ray. Good morning, Dr. Bradley.
Good morning. Good morning.
This is Bill Wright. I just wanted to say a few things about the demotion of Eddie Crispin.
Sure.
It appears to me that what the Commissioner Cox and Mayor Wu have done is nonsensical and not in the best interest of the citizens of Boston, given what a superior officer Eddie Crispin has been to this date. Mm-hmm. And for them to say that he cannot be a part of a statewide organization that's looking to make sure that we restore confidence in police agencies, mm-hmm. because there might be some conflict of interest, as you pointed out, he could simply recuse himself from any Boston-related cases that seem to be in that manner.
Right.
But the other problem I see is that, from what I look at, Commissioner Cox is, in a sense, a puppet of the current mayor, Michelle Wu.
Mm. And the former commissioner, Ed Davis.
The former commissioner, is basically the person making a lot of decisions concerning the Boston Police Department, including the placement of the chief of staff with Michael Cox, who is somebody who inherently has been hostile to Black officers throughout time.
Right.
So
and
that's part of why they think they can do things like this. But I believe that Mayor Michelle Wu, who is an accidental mayor, has made yet another mistake, particularly regarding Black people.
Well, I agree, but she's calculating that she won't pay a price for that. And let me give you another example of why you're on the right track with the Ed Davis connection, right? That Nicole Taub, who is the current chief of staff for Michael Cox, was the chief legal counsel for Ed Davis. Then they brought back Ed Callahan, who was there under Ed Davis, who was the director of personnel and other agencies. And then most recently, in my opinion, the ultimate insult as well was that, we have a Black female for the first time in charge of the patrol force, right? She's a superintendent in charge of more than qualified. Well, during the recent, and what I'm told is and I know Dr. Bradley, hold on to your seat. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. The recent Celtics celebration, they brought back a retired white superintendent, Ridge, to oversee the operations of the Celtics celebration.
What?
Yes. Okay. So if that isn't the ultimate slap in the face for our folks that we're not competent. Now, in history, we've had celebrations, we've had mass bombings, and that has never happened in that way. So what else can you read into this that the person who is in charge of the day-to-day is not competent to do so?
So wait, hold on.
That's why I said you to hold on to your seat.
Let me process this. So
one more.
You have a black female superintendent in charge of BFS,
Patrol.
the Bureau of Field Service, the Bureau of Field Services,
Yes.
and you bring back on contract a past white superintendent to run what she's qualified to run.
Right.
What kind of what is this?
This is the environment and why I was very forceful in my comments and what I had to say about this and why I feel the way I do and connecting the dots for people, because this makes no sense, but if you understand it, it's very sensible. Stand by, caller. I want to bring this other caller in and get their opinion. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Yes, Jamal, I'm back again.
Yeah. Okay.
So a couple things here. I really like that interview and whatnot, but there's a couple things that get missed here. First of all, I'm glad there's the first one that is mentioned that he also served on the Boston Police Reform Task Force. Because we served there together.
Right.
Another fun fact that many people may not know, and I have to put this in because sometimes I get written out of history, but I'm the one that brought decertification to Massachusetts. And then decertification, when it went to the State House, surprise, surprise, got watered down so much so that they were even afraid of the term decertification, even though that's what it does.
Yeah.
And then that they came up with an acronym, because Massachusetts is a sucker for acronyms. POST, right? But it serves these functions. We've always had, as Larry was talking about before, the MPTC who could certify officers. What I found was it was like we have a way to give people driver's licenses, but there was no mechanism by which you could revoke their license. So that's what I was trying to find out. I take umbrage at the fact that a lot of people have typified this as this came out of the George Floyd protest. It did not. It happened in my bedroom because of years, decades even, of study of me trying to look for viable avenues of police reform. And when I found the concept of police decertification, and at that time Massachusetts was only one of 6 states that did not have it, I was like, winner, winner, chicken dinner. And so I introduced that concept here, and it had nothing to do with any, and the reason I take umbrage with that is because I'm not a reactionary.
Right.
I don't try to create policies based off of headlines or whatever, the masses are doing. So lastly, I'll say, Eddie, once again, in our service on the Boston Police Reform Task Force, was very valuable, and just the human story, because as you know, Larry, when we feeding people and everything, Trader Joe's just called me out the blue again yesterday, and I called Eddie. Eddie's not even in town, and then Eddie put me on the phone with Officer Manny Cambridge, right?
Yep.
And I just dropped off 24 boxes of food over there at Catholic Charities, the Haitian Service Center on Columbia Road in Geneva, courtesy of Sergeant Detective Eddie Crispin.
Yeah. I know. Eddie's a past president of MAMLEO. I consider him a brother. Dr. Bradley is a past president of MAMLEO. And there has not been one president, the current president of MAMLEO, Dr. Jeffrey Lopes, is under their microscope as well. He was recently eligible for promotion. They brought up some bogus charges, in my opinion, against him right before the promotion selection, so he could be denied that promotion because these complaints are against him. How convenient that they come right before he's eligible to be promoted. So we see the handwriting on the wall. Dr. Bradley has been seen the raft, as well as Paul Joseph, who are living in former presidents of MAMLEO. There's not one of us who has not felt the wrath for standing up on principle. And I can tell it's just unfortunate that it's Eddie's turn. And and the other thing that I think people didn't really pay as much attention to, because now when the conflict of interest piece has been debunked, right? Now they're out there saying, well, there are other things, but they won't allude to what those other things. So now you're going to disparage him even more. They're having people believe that, well, this isn't really it. It's the other it that he was doing, but we can't talk about it, right? Because there is no it.
There's no it.
There is no it. But the damage that they try to do, and then to say there's a conflict of it. Well, Sagan, who serves in the mayor's cabinet position, and he has John Barrow's old job, and I forget what it was because it really didn't impact us, and really, in my opinion, is not doing so now. He was the one who was pushing for the body cameras out there, right? So there's no conflict with adding him to your cabinet, right? Who had an opinion different than the departments and independent, but you bring him on board, but Eddie can't serve in that position. Like I said, in the verbiage from this commissioner in his city council hearing, and like I said, it has to be tied in because it all connects, and who he surrounds himself is important. And like I said, in my opinion, the disrespect he just showed our black sister, who is a chief of patrol, and bringing someone out of retirement to oversee her because he don't think she's tasked with dealing with the problem of this
magnitude. Why have her
on
the command staff if you don't have any confidence in her?
Well, he'll say that's not the reason. There's some other reason, like Eddie is, something we don't.
Now that operations move, I never heard of nothing like that either. That's a complete slap in the face, and I feel really bad for that sister because that really says, to not only her but other women and us and black people, it says we have no confidence in your competence.
Well, to that point as well, is that under Commissioner Cox, there have been more black people. He talks about having the most diverse command staff. It must be by subtraction because he has demoted more black people on the command staff than anyone I know of, black or white.
And Larry, if I could add, our political system has a serious flaw. You can be a city council president with 7 or 8 staff members and win an election for mayor, and suddenly you have 17,000 employees.
Right.
In no other area do we do this. It's like taking a fresh lieutenant out of West Point and 6 months later making that person a colonel or general.
And then having a major war. And this is why we're not.
The problem, of course, is this mayor has, from the start, voting for Bill Linehan versus Alana Presley for council president, opposing the elected school committee. If 77% of your constituents want anything, a savvy politician agrees with them.
Well,
and the O'Brien School proposal to move from Roxbury to historically hostile West Roxbury, or her opposing what the downtown business leaders have said about this addition of tax and how it will thwart the efforts to improve since the COVID shutdown. This is a continuing growing list of errors that she makes, and Mayor Wu has no place in her history where she actually got to know black people. That's why I believe she makes so many mistakes when it comes to trying to work with or deal with or make judgments about black people, the black community.
Well, this is
and
why,
of course, in her arrogance,
it's really right. It comes down to what they say: when people show you who they are, believe them. And this is an instance where Michelle Wu, the current mayor, ran on fixing a lot of problems, schools, and they're not any better. Mass and Cass, the problem is just moved across a little further down the street. So this is just another layer of that, and for her to say that, blindly she supports the police commissioner. So what she's saying is that because she was the one, along with the commissioner, after city council initially had removed that money from the budget, which is not needed, which would advance having more people of color, women and veterans promoted to the rank of sergeant. And currently we have a black female sergeant who is eligible to be promoted to lieutenant, who they've had under internal affairs for 5 years and still no resolution to her matter, but she's still walking around with a gun and a badge. Go figure that, right? So we see all this, and we cannot allow it to take place because we have a person who is black running this department when everything around him does not benefit or even fairly assess our situations in the way they do. And the people he surrounds, they judge you by the company you keep. Go ahead, Javon.
Let me just interject this, because this happens a couple times when we talk, particularly about Mayor Wu. And it makes me uncomfortable a little bit when we do this in conversation. And it's something I think could be noted for all people when we're having a discussion or you're making an argument or something like that. So I was with you with everything you're saying, because that's all stuff, everybody has the right to disagree with the policies, positions, and everything. But then when we make a statement like she doesn't have a relationship with any black people, that's where it gets a little dicey for me, because you have no way of knowing who she has relationships with. And even if she did, let's say her best friend might be Clarence Thomas, and then you would say, well, I don't like the type of black people that she knows, or whatever it is. So I think that we cheapen our argument when we inject something like that in there, and we should just, in my view, stick to the script about what we disagree with in terms of the policy, because a lot of that stuff, with her being a woman, her being Asian and all that, I've heard people, particularly on this show, not you in this case, Bill, but other people on this show have called in, and some of the comments that we say, to me, get into real borderline, like, we're displaying behaviors of some of the people that we are trying to critique.
Well, see, I can tell you from my perspective, like I said, I'm not weighing in on who her friends are, but I can tell you from this Nicole Taub, and Dr. Bradley can speak to it as well, is that the history and the documentation shows her displeasure and her actions towards black officers. So those are things that we have the evidence to support her behavior as a chief legal counsel in a number of offices and cases. This drug hair test, she was the one who was leading this and defending these racist policies. So to bring that person back it should be troubling itself when there are so many other people out there. Even the media relations person, Mary Ellen Burns, these were all Ed Davis's people. So we voted.
Even the fact that Ed Davis is a trusted consultant,
right,
locally or nationally.
Yeah.
But let me just interject something here.
Yeah.
Because as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, I'm saying to myself, Mel Wu will stand up and talk to this issue without any reserve or any issue, any concern, because there's no consequences.
Right. We'll go back to the voting.
It goes right back to voting. Right. I want to make sure I put that on the table.
Yeah.
It goes back to the lack of voting.
Yeah.
And my other hit is that, is Michael Cox actually running the police department? I would argue that he's not.
Well, we've had all this going on, and people are saying, that they don't see him connected to the community. These violent shootings we had, and no one's hearing from him. Mr. Wright, any final question before we go? Because we've got to grab these other calls.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the major threats to all Boston neighborhoods is gentrification, as we all know. And if you look at the South End and what it used to be and who used to live there, it's the laboratory that shows you what could happen in many other neighborhoods, whether they are mostly white, black, whatever. And there could be a time in the future when people are saying, remember when black people used to live in Roxbury?
Right, I know. Yep. Well, they said that the South End, and even in Beacon Hill. I want Sergeant Horatio Homer, the first African American police officer in the city of Boston. It's hard to believe people when I tell them that he lived on Beacon Hill, his family, and you wouldn't believe that. Like I said, so we're going through that same process. But thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And like I said, a reminder, folks, there's a community meeting. Let's talk about it. Is BPD really committed to police reform? That's this upcoming Wednesday, July 17th, from 7 to 9 p.m. at 12th Baptist Church, 142 Warren Street, Roxbury, 02119. Again, that's 7 to 9 p.m. this coming Wednesday, July 17th at the 12th Baptist Church, a community meeting. This is going to touch on these issues that we've discussed. Jamal, stand by. I want to bring this other caller in to get their perspective. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning. I just have a question, and I'm not trying to be funny or anything like that, but since when did Commissioner Michael Cox play the Sambo part?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. I like I said, I'm not gonna characterize. I'm gonna break down the behavior, and the reason why I gave people some of that behind the scenes, because I know from growing up, and I saw the changes because I saw them in real time of someone who we're close in age. Matter of fact, we're the same age, and the difference, like I said, busing my family, he didn't have a choice. I had to get on that bus. In middle school, his family luckily had a choice and didn't have to experience those things. So when you're seeing things from a different lens, and when you're telling people to pull up their bootstraps and they've never owned a pair of boots or even shoes, it's hard for you to have, in my opinion, an elitist attitude that somehow people are not trying hard enough or they're not applying themselves because they didn't have the same opportunities that you did. I think it's very elitist, knowing what I know. So,
and see, not for nothing, this is what concerns me, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. So, for me, we could disagree with Michael Cox and his position and, blah, 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 blah. But, I think use of a term like Sambo, that's beyond the pale for me, for my taste. Now once again, you could describe the behavior. We think his policies should be stronger. We would have hoped that he would have been a more fierce advocate for the black community or black officers or whatever. But when we use terms like Sambo and others, I just don't think. I don't think that helps us out.
I agree. Like I said, I'm pointing to the issues. I'm pointing to statements. These are things and words and comments that came out of his mouth. These are actions that he's taking that are contrary to moving us forward in what they call is progressive or diversity. They are just counter, and that's why I like to stay in that realm of it. Digger, thank you, sir. The lines are blazing here this morning. Thank you, sir.
But I would argue that he's not moving us forward. I argue that he was moving.
It's regression.
Backwards,
it's regression.
That's really sad. I'm very disappointed.
Right. Jamal, somebody. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I know the show's almost over. Look, just want to say, I heard a lot of stages of conversation. Let's be very clear now that Mayor Wu, this whole thing of people of color is overrated. She does not like or respect black people whatsoever. If you look at her track record, it is terrible. And it's out there publicly in terms of the things that she's done. So try. They talk about Gandhi and how Dr. King adopted his whole policy around peaceful. Look at Gandhi said that black people are unintelligent and cannot be trusted. And so I'm just saying that we need to be looking at Mayor Wu from the perspective that she is.
Well, here's the
She don't like black people.
Hold on. Sadiq, you just made the leap from comments that Gandhi made when he was a young lawyer working for the South African apartheid regime.
I never said anything about that. I don't even know about that.
Oh, well, see, because I did the further research. Those comments that you're referring to with Gandhi was when he was a young lawyer and he was working for the apartheid regime as a young lawyer in South Africa. That's when he made those comments, as abhorrent as they are. My point is it has absolutely zero in his universes away from Michelle Wu. And sometimes when you try to put these feelings and attribute these feelings and statements on her, that's fine, it's your opinion, but you need facts.
Let the bottom line.
Siddiqui, once again, you don't know nothing. I have not worked at City Hall since May. You don't know anything, Siddiqui. You're constantly wrong, and you speak as if it's fact, and that's your problem.
Say that about Nubian Square.
Listen,
we got Nubian Square, don't we? The bottom line is that
gentlemen, Siddiqui.
They don't appreciate Mayor Wu because she's anti-black. That's all I got to say.
Okay,
y'all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. So, folks, to that point,
when you use terms like anti-black without proof of being anti-black, see, once again, you can say the policies and everything that you disagree with, but terms like anti-black,
right? So there's
that's very difficult.
So to this point, right, Jamal, I get it. There's an election coming up, and this is how we decide these things is the election. And Dr. Bradley, I want to let you speak, and I apologize because I want because what I want you to weigh in, because you have been on the receiving end of this as well. You served as a deputy superintendent, and you were demoted over something, so you know what it's like when your accusations made against you and something is taken away from you unjustly. So without going into all these, can you just explain what you're going? You know what Eddie's going through.
Well, I know exactly what he's going through. He's going through that idea that you put it out there all the time. If you are here long enough, you're going to get your turn, and you realize that it's not about what you did; it's about who you are. You know what I mean? So when you do, and you have done all you can. And Jamal just made a very good comment that shows the commitment that now Sergeant Detective Crispin should be Deputy Superintendent Crispin has for the community.
Right.
And if you're out there, doing what you need to do to project or to carry out this idea of community policing, and then once you make a move to further community policing, you get you get your head chopped off.
And to that point,
that's
someone
the problem.
High up in the Boston Police Department at the time, who was a very close friend of mine, when they knew I was running for president of MAMLEO and got elected, called me and offered me a position with them, and said, because me just being elected to MAMLEO was a career ender for me. Just being the president of MAMLEO. So that made me more, I'm like, so I didn't take the offer, and I spent 10 years as president of MAMLEO because I find it, one, insulting, and then I knew even how more important the work at MAMLEO was, even if it came a personal sacrifice. Now, I'm not calling myself a martyr or anything of that nature, but to say that to people, that they don't understand the people like you, me, Eddie, that we cannot be bought off.
Right. You see what happens is that they would say to you when selecting you, if you're running in MAMLEO or you're active in MAMLEO, well, that's the deal breaker. But some folks like myself will look at it as, okay, I will become a command staff member, but I'm gonna stay connected to this, and they're gonna know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
Which is why I asked a question about Eddie Crispin serving as a command staff member on the post, because being there will be of value to the police department, because if he's there as a command staff member, he can give the post forewarning, fair warning that this is coming down the pack. He can give the police department that the post is going to push for this. You need to be prepared to get this done.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So having him there would be an asset.
And even more so, to your point, in his role that before he was demoted was at the academy,
Yes.
Well, what better to have somebody giving firsthand knowledge to people who are getting ready to start their journey in law enforcement,
Exactly.
right? Having it firsthand, you know, and embedded in them right off the bat. I know Jamal spoke to the academy class recently as well. You know, Jamal,
before you go to Larry, the key piece here is this right here, is this. Eddie Crispin's position on the post is a complete and clear asset to the Boston Police Department and its community policing efforts.
Right.
That is the piece. So because the Boston PD, by removing him from the command staff, when they did that, they said to me that their actions are not aligned with their words. Well, they're saying they're pushing for community policing, but actually they're behaving entirely differently.
You just kind of where I was going with this, because if you look at all the trajectories of Eddie Crispin's path in his career, right? He served on OPAT. He's an attorney. He lives in the community. He's of Haitian background. He's been out there doing everything they claim they want a leader to do, lead by example, right? He has checked all those boxes. And this is just another example of somebody recognizing his talent and his skill and saying, we think you would perfect. The Attorney General said there is no conflict. There is no conflict here, folks. So nothing to see here. So instead of them saying, you know what, maybe we got this wrong, we need to reconsider, right? Because we're really doing a disservice to the community. This is bigger than Eddie.
But Larry, why would I, as a community member, I'm speaking from the perspective of a community member, why would I believe any command staff member on the Boston Police Department or the commissioner himself who comes out to my meeting and tell the community that we're all in support of community policing?
Right.
When I then look at your behavior and I see you remove someone, right, you know, that is active in the community, that's doing the right thing, from a very important position as the post.
Well, that's why I said, Jamal,
doesn't make any sense to me.
You have been around for quite some time, right? Who on the command staff do you have? Because you're out there in the community. I know. I work with you. I consider you a brother. Who do you have a relationship now that Eddie is no longer on the command staff? Who is your default person that you can reach out at that level for support for the efforts in the community?
So first of all, I don't even know who the command staff is, right? Wow. So I would say no. But I mean, obviously, like, you know, I just spoke at the academy last week or whatever. So I'm friendly with, you know, Nora and Sky and all that type of thing. But I don't just pick up the phone and call them like, hey, I got food. You know what I mean? You got any families that need it? Right. It's not that level of relationship. But yeah, no, I mean, between like when you were still active, people like you, like Eddie, those relationships are rare to call up on the cell phone, just like I call up any of my buddies.
But this is what I'm talking about. This is what they claim they want, and it's being delivered, right?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
And now you remove that.
Yeah,
that's a key component. You know,
so I asked myself the question: what is the rest of the story here? What is the real reason for this removal?
But is it any less disrespectful? Like I said, is basically diminishing the powers of our black sister who is the chief of patrol and having someone come in who's retired because for some reason in your mind she's not up to the task, right? Because it's not just that day. Before my retirement, when she was and I would hear a different tone when we had these major events of other people speaking over her, other people who were taking liberties that they had never heard when there was a white male in charge of that bureau all these years, you know. So I'm not saying everything is, but you have to, when you start to unpack it, and like I said, I judge the people by the company they keep. And Michael Cox has surrounded himself with the resurrection of Ed Davis. And even you tie into that the financial benefit that Ed Davis, people aren't paying enough attention to this. With the new contract that Boston Police Patrolman signed with the city of Boston, Ed Davis got a no-bid contract for any residual details that are not filled by law enforcement go to Ed Davis's company. Do you think that's going to filter down to our community? How does that happen? We're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah. How is it not a violation of the law? The 30B law just says that you have to go through some type of negotiation, you know, bidding for this.
Right. So you start to connect all the dots, and it's very simple. What's going on here?
Yeah, it is. But I think the other thing is, it goes back to now. This is why you need to vote. I'm gonna keep hammering that because I think it's clear. That,
you're hammering, but you don't have any nails.
I hear you, brother. I'm swinging. I'm swinging it.
Swing it. I know.
I'm swinging it.
I know.
And I think the other thing is that they would not have I can tell you from my own experience, sitting on the command staff for 5 years, they would not have brought in a Claiborne to oversee Ridge. You know what I'm saying?
Well, look what happened.
They would not have done
That's a perfect example. Remember the Snell Grove incident down at Fenway Park, right? Claiborne wasn't even there.
But
he was in charge of patrol at the time. He wasn't even there. The guy that was there directing it, O'Toole,
the white guy,
right? Nothing happened to him. Claiborne was demoted over a matter where he was at home because the same thing when you go back and you look at what happened to Jerome Hall Brewster, the detective who lost his detective rating and was demoted because of the white female that was murdered down there in Brigham Circle, in an investigation about something unrelated that they claimed somehow they connected it to him because somebody had to pay a price for it. In the history of the Boston Police Department, even in your matter, Dr. Bradley, they told me we were trying to negotiate something because we knew this was crazy, and they said the best offer that Ed Davis said he could give you was for you to be demoted from sergeant detective to patrolman. Now, that has not been offered to anyone other than
I'm sure he was shocked about when he got my response.
Right. But like, we had a lieutenant, Hispanic lieutenant, who had an issue. And they said he could stay on the job if he gave up his rank of lieutenant and went back down to patrolman. And we see these things. And like I said, people on paper would think Michael Cox would be the best reformer, having had what happened to him, and it has been a disaster.
Not so, but that was, in that regard, and that is, in my opinion, the cold tap.
Judge you by the company you keep. Jamal,
judge you by the company? That's not
definitely
the cold tap.
Any remarks before we let you go? Before we, like I said, folks.
I just think we need to do better with our arguments, and that type of stuff, and like that little interchange right there, like even that. Well, I know you work for the city, so you suppose that if I did have a job with the city, right? That changes my opinion or views on anything? Boy, he ain't been paying attention to who I am for the past 40 years.
People, I'm not just saying that because of our relationship. You have not changed. You hold accountable. And I can tell people, I give credit where credit's due. Like, crime is down, but this is not about crime.
And here go me. Look, I'm not pro City of Boston, pro City Hall, pro Michelle Wu, pro Michael Cox, or anti any of those things. I am straight down the middle. I am pro facts.
Yeah.
Pro justice, pro sensibility, pro common sense, and a lot of this other stuff. Because, for instance, like with the anti-black comment, to me, a lot of the things that are happening are anti-Asian. One of the last comments that he made on another broadcast is when he referred to Michelle Wu as the Dragon Lady. I don't see things like that, and she has ice in her veins. Things like that, I don't. I can't, as a person who believes in justice and fairness, I can't sit and have anybody talk about that. And not for that, in this city, I've had enemies that I deal with, and that I'm going against, and we're having intense debates and all that, and I never called them no names like that.
No, I think
it's useless.
The personal is a distraction from the real issues, are the treatment and the things that you can that are tangible, that you can point out, articulate, and you can support. Thank you, my brother. We've got to run. God willing, I will see you in the AM. I hope you're feeling better. Folks, we want to a community meeting. Let's talk about it. Is BPD really committed to police reform? That's this Wednesday, July 17th. July, probably said no. 7 to 9 p.m. at the 12th Baptist Church, 142 Warren Street, Roxbury, Mass. Again, community meeting. Let's talk about it. And there's going to be another one next Saturday at MAMLEO headquarters. I believe it's 11 o'clock. We'll have more on that as well. That's going to take place next Saturday. A follow up to that. And we can't just talk about it. We got to be about it, Dr. Bradley. And it's just, we talk about this but this has had legs longer than they expected, but I still think, it's not where we need it to be as far as getting change affected. Dr. Bradley, any closing remarks, sir?
No, I'm just vote. That's my remark. Vote. This is a good reason why we have to do better at the voting poll. Not only register, but we got to show up.
And Pastor Hop, thank you, sir, for that spirited conversation in the top of the 7 o'clock hour. It's always good when we can interchange, like I said, and the love here. We move on and forward because at the end of the day, we're just trying to do better for folks. Folks, you've been listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. God willing, we'll be back next week. Dr. Bradley?
Be blessed.
All right.
Hustle real hard. Hustle. So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. Hustle real hard. Hustle real hard. Hustle real hard. I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'? You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strapped. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks. This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer. Cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard.